Luke Bhencke is joining us at Parallax to talk about his upcoming course, which begins on January the 6th. Huh? January the 6th and the 7th for people in Melbourne, because you're from Melbourne. So it would be January 6th is a Saturday, first Saturday of the month. We usually begin our courses, our month-long courses at Parallax. And you're going to be talking about Gurdjieff, and the course is called The Hard Way. So I thought today, I could ask you first about the title, because I find the title beautifully provocative. It's what nobody wants anymore, but it's what we need. And I also want to go through the different modules that you proposed, which are sleep and awakening, sex and soul, God and service. So how does that sound?
No, that sounds good. And it is a one-time course. I think we spoke about this earlier, and for good reason, not to replicate anything, but to see if there is an opportunity, a point in time to really work with something, and not wishing to have it replicated again at some point in the future. That doesn't mean that the material might not be covered in some way, shape or form, but the course as it's structured and as it's formed won't happen again. So this is a last time exclusive offer. To your question,
a one-time limited offer is what you wrote, which I love, because it's so marketing, and yet it's the hard way. So that's about as bad marketing as you could get.
It is, yeah.
If you're trying to convince somebody to do a course, that's difficult, and then, but it's a one-time limited offer that might, be a hook.
Might be a hook, yeah. The title, the hard way. It really comes from my experience, and certainly others that I've worked with over a long time. But also, there seems to be this current theme, particularly on the internet, that this spiritual stuff is relatively easy as long as you follow the 12 kind of phases, or you read a book, or you attend a course, or there seems to be something very alluring, but also something very easy. I've always found it odd that we accept that if we want to be a lawyer or a doctor or go into a vocation, that there's generally a long period of time with which to train, to prepare, and it's something that is not going to be easy. You've got to spend a lot of time, energy, and effort. But when it comes to my own transformation, spiritually speaking, that this should all be free and easy. And so this title of a hard way kind of gets to the nub of the question. It's not easy, but that's the good news. If one can accept that what I'm trying is not easy, that it is the hard way, then most of one's problems are solved, because trying to move into anything that's relatively easy, you expect it to be easy. But when you start to come across kind of barriers or blockages, rather than being able to see them as challenges and opportunities, one shirks away from it. So this hard way, this course is just to let everybody know that that it is hard. Life generally is hard. That doesn't mean there's no joy, or no happiness or peace, but to accept that it's a hard way. And what does that mean? Very, very practically. What does that mean? What does that mean in terms of changing my orientation, my approach, and also being able to assess the material that's out there? What appears to be easy as opposed to appearing to be hard? What's the reality? It's like anything. If you're wanting to do a course at university, or if you're wanting to go into business, you have to evaluate. You have to evaluate, how do I approach this? What are the things that might be needed? So that's the title, The Hard Way. And as you said a little bit earlier, it's not the most well-formed marketing tool, because it's not saying the word easy in there, or it's not something alluring and that people will get something out of it of what they normally expect. But there might be something else
Yeah.
that they get out of it.
Well, I have a sense that we need to be kind of anti-marketing in some way if we're heading towards the truth. Like we have to go against the current.
Yeah.
Yeah, as you were speaking, I was thinking of a couple things. I was thinking about uh, in the uh, in the Tibetan Book of the Dead, they talk about when you die, you can go towards the bright and shiny, alluring light, or you can go towards the clear light. And
Yeah.
most of the time, we go towards the bright and shiny, alluring kind of, and we get dazzled by something that um, seems to be like immediately gratifying, and we miss the clear light, which is infinitely deeper and more profound.
Yeah. Yeah. No, and I think it's natural to go towards the shiny toys, right? There's
Mm-hmm.
something there to play with. Oh, this is sort of wonderful. But, in those really heartfelt moments, those moments of vulnerability, those moments where you may have hit kind of bottom, there's something else that kind of appears there. It's like all of the shininess gives way or gets parked, and something else can come through. Um, and that kind of goes to that first uh, module around sleep and awakening,
Mm-hmm.
where Gurdjieff was quite emphatic that really what prevents us from living a full life, being really engaged with life, is this notion of sleep. That
Yeah,
somehow there's something inside of me which is very, very kind of passive. And why is that? Why is that at a very practical level? Not just to say that we're asleep or we're in dreams, but why? Why
mm-hmm.
is that? And if we could somehow awaken a little bit out of that, whatever those two words mean, that life might be a little different. And even in our own lives, we see that there are moments of quality, and sometimes it could be in moments of trauma or in moments of joy, uh, but there's something that becomes a bit alive in us. All of a sudden, we see things in a bit of a different way. That doesn't mean we're enlightened and all of a sudden we understand everything, but there's something more alive in us. This
Mm-hmm.
quality. What is that practically? What
Yeah,
is that quality that comes and goes? And so to look at that in a very different way, without all of the shackles and all of the loaded meanings, is something that can become clear. If I go back to what you're saying, this clear light. What does it mean to have clarity? And in those moments when I just come out of that sleep a little bit, things become clearer. There's something
mm-hmm.
about my awareness, something about my body, my feeling that there's this clarity. And then I drop back into sleep again, or something resembling it.
Yeah.
And so if there's an opportunity to maybe work with that, and see that, then who knows what the possibilities are.
Yeah, I was thinking about in my own experience. Um, I would also say sleep is like laziness. And I remember Carl Jung saying that the biggest evil is laziness. It's not these heinous acts that they're almost they come from inadvertence, or laziness. That's the source of it. It's just not wanting to be here, or wanting to live in this mechanical state, and then not taking this little opening of clear light that is being presented us, and making that our meaning.
Yes. Yes. I mean, I know for me, I've said and done a lot of stupid things. Um, and the regret and the remorse afterwards, because I know better. Why did I
Yeah.
say that? Why did I hurt that person? Why did I do this insane stuff? I knew it wasn't helpful, but yet there was something in me that was
Mm.
blinded, and then it's only afterwards I feel this deep remorse. Why? And it seems that my whole life is just a series of saying and doing a lot of dumb things. And so there's this real question: why? Why at that moment? There's something lost in me that just goes with this.
Yeah, it's
This
always a moment, hey?
yeah. It's a moment, and I'm kind of taken away. I ignite the bomb, and then there's this carnage, and then I'm left with needing to pick up the pieces. When I know,
Mm-hmm.
why did I say that? Why? That was just dumb. That that wasn't helpful. So there's something in me that knows, but then there's something in me that acts very contrary to it. Why? Why is that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. That is sort of a great mystery. What is it in us that, what is it in us that is against us?
Yeah,
At some level, right? It
yeah,
seems to be against our better interest, and it never seems it seems very difficult to break through this Gorgon knot of our own inadvertence, and doing acting in ways that are not helpful to ourselves and others.
yeah. And it really speaks to those powerful forces in us. And there's one moment I wish for this wholeness and this peace and a relationship with my neighbour. And then at another moment, I just want to go to the pub and get drunk and do all sorts of, nutty stuff. But but when if one if one can find a way to be there, there are some interesting forces at play, something that pushes me somewhere and something that calls me to a
Mhm.
different place. But
So is
I'm
it?
often not aware of it.
Excuse me. Yeah. So is it like, okay? Is it choosing to be in another place than the pub which matters, or is it the awareness that you have in the pub or in the other place that matters? You know,
Well,
because like we
maybe it's
try to
a little
choose
bit of
like
both.
this is better and this is but
Yeah,
this preference between things, maybe it's even more profound to be
yeah.
doing what Gurdjieff called self-remembrance practice in the pub.
Yes, and I've had those experiences. I can remember coming from a retreat once, and the only thing I wanted to do was go down to the pub or or go to a party. And I remember being at the party or the pub and feeling remorse. What drove me here? Like I just come from this experience where there was a real quietness and this clarity, and then yet this other force which I was just unaware of that pushed me into a certain place. And then that, as you're saying, well, I'm now in the midst of it. I'm now at the pub. Okay, how do I be here? How do I bring that other experience into this one
Mm-hmm.
so I can be more engaged? So it's not so much a preference between good and bad. It's how did I arrive here? Was I able to see that, whether it's at a pub or whether it's in a temple or on retreat or at a job or on the toilet or eating in a restaurant? It's not so much where I am, but can I be there wherever I've arrived? And I think that for me is the mystery. I somehow get there, something pushes me, and then I wonder, how did I get here? Well, while I'm there, I should be making use of it. How
Mm-hmm.
do I be more present? How do I enliven something to be more awake and less asleep to the situation that I'm in? And my experience of that going to the pub is the beer I had or two was wonderful. rather
Yeah.
than just chucking them down. I actually tasted it.
Yeah.
I was there with it more. That was, a revelation to me. Normally, when I do any of that, if I eat or if I drink, it's just throwing it down. It's just consuming. But yet, I was shown there was a different way. I can be with that. I can be with my beer, and so
Yeah,
beer
that's good.
got
That's good.
a whole
Yeah.
new flavor.
Because usually we want to reject the world. There's a
Yeah,
tendency to want to go into a special kind of situation and then be there forever. But we can't do that, and also we can't just be in this turbulent. That's a French word. We can't be in this chaos all the
yes,
time without having moments where we leave. And so I think an oscillation between, let's say, the retreat and the world is the best way to live, um, from my perspective.
yes, and certainly for Gurdjieff, having both feet firmly planted in earth and heaven,
Mm.
is a full way to live. One or the other, we tend to hop around, but to
Yeah.
to really walk, to be firmly planted in either. But yes, I yo-yo though, and I think that's what it's like early on in, say, one's journey. One yo-yos. There's
Hmm.
a
Hmm.
there's moments of, oh yes, I need to follow a path, and I wish for something, and then the next moment I'm carried away with whatever, until something begins to start to coalesce, or at least begin to meet in me, and to begin to understand, yeah, I need to bring these worlds together in me.
Yeah.
How do I do that?
Yeah. I mean, you're a family guy, right? You have a family,
Mm,
and
yeah,
you run businesses, and so you're not living in a cave in Tibet somewhere. You're right in the thick of it. Do you find that a challenge? I mean, it's, of course, it's the hard way, so it is a challenge. But yeah, just like, let's say, spiritual practice and family worldly life. I think
yes,
is part of Gurdjieff's kind of emphasis, being able to do that in the world. That being the
yeah.
fourth way. Is that speak to you, or?
Yes, no, it does. And that's, why he mentions this hard way requires a lot. Most other spiritual ways, yes, you can go into a cave or somewhere. You tend to isolate yourself away from life, whether it's for a time or for your lifetime. But
Mhm.
you take yourself out of the conditions with which you find yourself. For him, it was no. You need to see where you're at. And certainly for me, to be able to bring a spiritual practice right in the midst of my family life, business, and to do that intelligently, uh, is very, very difficult right from word go,
Yeah.
because you come up against all sorts of things. So one of the things one learns on the hard way is to be in credit with your family. It's a saying that if I wish to go away on a retreat, or there's something I wish to try, or I wish to meet up with someone, or I need to have time to read a book, or whatever it is, and that takes you away from family or business, then you need to be in credit. What does that mean? Well, you need to work for your family, work for your business to create that
Hmm.
space
Yeah.
that I can then give to myself. So there's a work
That's for
before
sure.
it
Yeah.
even works. you know.
Yeah.
Um,
Because I always find that the activities of the family create a complete um, practice environment already.
yes.
There was a Zen teacher I met who used to say that it was like, for the Western people, a family is like a monastery.
Yeah.
In the sense, all the parameters are there. You have children, you have jobs, there's always something to do. There's not this all this time, so you have to really work to use your time in a clear way, and so time becomes very precious, and important. And you can easily, again, you can easily just get tired, right? Get burned out and find yourself asleep again, right? In
Yes.
front of the
Yeah.
television, or and letting things slide. Or but you always have to get back up and hmm, you know.
Yes, and if one's not careful, to find a way to include family in business, it doesn't have to be in an obvious way. You don't have to preach to anyone, but how do I use the material of life for my own work in
Yeah.
that sense? Otherwise, a schism gets created. I start to resent my family and business. Oh, it's taking me away from my
Hmm.
spiritual practice. And you see this schism a great deal where people eventually go off to some kind of commune to escape.
Yeah.
And that's was real escapism and at least for me, not healthy. But to find a way to integrate also gives a bit of a glimpse of just how hard the hard way is, not only for my own life, but just the way that the world works. It's hard to change anything. I mean, to have real change because there's something that's needed.
Hmm.
There might be fashions that come and go, but real change is difficult. And to experience that, start at home. Start at
Yeah.
home. How do I work with my family, my business, friends? Mm.
Absolutely. Well, I was thinking you mentioned credit, and I was also thinking about this idea of being obligation debt. I think that's a Gurdjieffian notion,
Yeah.
that we have a being obligation debt that we have to pay off. So there's, how do we pay off that debt?
Well, that's a good question. You know, I find it strange. We come in with a great gift into life, a body. We're given a body. I didn't create it, and I'm pretty sure you didn't. But yet we're here, and there's this vehicle, this support kind of mechanism, if you'd like, that's provided to us. That's our first gift. In a sense, we're in debt to it. This thing that carries me and supports me my entire life. Without a body, what am I? And so one of the obligations is I need to understand my body because it's made of all of the forces and energies of the universe. I mean, kind of literally. And so if I can begin to have a sense of, well, what is this gift, this body, and why have I been provided this gift? And like any gift, if you want to understand it, you've got to look at it. You've got to try to work out its parts, how it relates, all of those things.
Yeah.
So in a
You
sense,
said
that
look at it.
yeah,
You didn't say like go to the gym and build big muscles and become a super yogi or something like that. I think this is a question of awareness, isn't it?
yeah, it's a question of well, what's here? I mean, yes, one needs to keep up a certain level of fitness and health to keep the body working, but that can be um, done in a way that's very unhealthy. If you're always at the gym, you're always trying to shape this kind of body into something, trying to manipulate it, rather than really looking at it. Well, okay, what's here? How is it speaking to me? And it won't speak in English or French.
Hmm.
It will speak in its language, and to begin to understand it, and
It's
often, you and I'm the same way. I don't tend to listen to my body until something breaks in it. It might be screaming out to me and I ignore it. I push on. But well, maybe it's saying something. Maybe those aches and pains are its language that's trying to speak to me.
Mhm.
But in our modern culture, the body is bad. The body is just a thing. It's just an object, and the mind is really where it's all at. But that's really to ignore a gift, and to
Mhm.
ignore a gift is,
A problem. Yeah.
there. The problem is I need to be here and study it, and maybe maybe really looking at the body and trying to have a sense of its needs might help inform me on other things. Who
Yeah.
knows? It's open question.
When you said that, it almost like that's the definition of sin or something, is to ignore the gift.
Yeah.
Um,
And particularly a gift that's freely given. To ignore it, wow, that's what an
Something
insult
terrible.
to the
Hmm.
giver.
Hmm.
You know, and that should make us humble. And it's only when we begin to be ill or injured that we have a much clearer sense of how much we rely upon the body and how much we've ignored it,
Yep.
that we start to look inwards. So illness and injury can actually be a great catalyst for that looking inward. But even then, it's often short-lived with people, and then they kind of carry on rather than, wow, I've been given an opportunity to listen to my body.
Hmm. Hmm. So what about that's let's say that covers some of the things related to the first unit, sleep and awakening.
Yeah,
Maybe we can look at your second unit, which is called sex and soul. So I don't think I know what Gurdjieff has to say about sexuality. I don't think I mean, I have some inkling perhaps of what he might say about it, but that doesn't seem to be like something that would be obvious to me in his teaching. So I'm curious about what that is, and also what he means by a soul. So
yeah, yeah. Yes. Well, I mean, just broadly, he says we really don't understand sex. We think we do, um, but it's a very potent life force, something that comes from a very high place to really give life to life. It powers everything, powers everything. And so for him, it's almost an illusion that we have any sense that we can control it or do anything with it. Um, but it can be a force in which we can start to see work in us and appreciate. And for Gurdjieff, the energy of sex, just generally right across the board, isn't able to work properly in us. And the main reason for that is that we're not harmonized. We're out of whack,
mm,
out of
mm,
balance. We're lopsided. So
mm,
this very high, very powerful energy, which should be there to help form a soul, a vehicle for something else, really gets out of place, higgledy-piggledy. And he calls this really the abuse of sex. And we're all prone to it because we are born and live into a life where we are tossed around and we don't really pay any attention to it. And so these very
mm,
high energies, rather than being able to find a home in us, find its rightful place, often then go to wrong places,
mm,
into addictions, into abuse, into vehemence, even in the body, going into the twitches, the fidgets. You see someone who's twitching their leg a lot or they're constantly moving. It's this energy that can't find a home, and so it has to come out of us in some way, shape, or form. And
mm,
a normal way is through the act of sex. That's a way to help eliminate or to remove that excess from us. And in our modern world and in the world period, you look at how sex is used.
yeah, but
It's
that becomes a kind of compulsive act that's not married to anything more
yeah,
profound. Yeah,
but yet it's for most people it's one of the closest experiences they'll get to a spiritual one.
yeah.
It's and it drives so much, um, not so much because of uh, the arousal level, but there's moments in the experience of sex where I'm free from myself, and yet myself, and yet also in a way immersed with the other. It's
Yeah.
a very interesting experience. And because we can't be nourished in any other way, often in modern life, then we seek out those experiences, and sex is one way to do that. And of course, there's others, there's addictions and everything else, but that's in a sense what he calls the abuse, because we don't understand it. We don't understand that this energy needs to find a place. So we need to put our house in order first, and then this
Yeah.
energy will find its place. And so that's where most of his work is being able to balance something and not trying to manipulate. Where
Mm-hmm. Not
you
trying to
see,
manipulate. Yeah, that's a tricky point, right? Because there's lots of manipulation, I think. Even
mm,
if it when you combine spirituality and sex. So in these tantric schools and things like that. But but it's a very, on the other hand, sexuality is quite simple as well. There's a simplicity to it. And I think people try to make it complicated, as in a
oh
myriad of
yes,
ways. In a
all
myriad of
these
ways.
all these rules and sort of regulations. And I know for Gurdjieff that he essentially said that there were no rules. You
Hmm.
needed to find out for yourself what your needs are,
Yeah.
but very much from a practical point of view, not because of the fashion of the day, because that comes and goes. It's what do I need? How do I see this working in me? And
Hmm.
if I see something going awry, okay, it's not that I attempt to change the energy of sex. It's maybe there's something that's where it's not finding its place in me. Okay,
Mm.
maybe there's something I can work on there. So in a way, it's a humbleness, it's an awe that this potent energy I need to be very respectful of, because it can take me to all sorts of places, you know.
Yeah.
And I've certainly experienced this myself when it works in all sorts of odd ways. That force is so strong. I'm chasing after the next pretty piece. I'm wanting to have that next conquest,
Hmm. Hmm.
because that force is so powerful, and then that can turn into the competition in business and wanting to win, and all of this stuff that can flow out of this energy just not finding a healthy place in us. So it's a big question.
Yeah, for
So for
sure.
good, it's about just trying to reset things a little, and maybe approaching it from a bit of a different way without all of the shackles around it.
Hmm. Yeah, I remember hearing something from the Sufis that talk about, how we need to uh, we need to create this kind of substance that is like a samadhi, a concentrated substance.
Mm,
Uh-huh.
yeah.
And that is sort of like, we need, that is kind of giving the life gift. And if we don't do that, then things go awry. And that kind of samadhi sense that you get in deep meditation, or in deep sexuality, is almost like that. It's almost like this is what gives us life, instead of let it keeps us in the mechanical, or the gray, or the sleep.
Yes, yes. And it's constantly flowing through us.
Hmm.
Um, we can't turn off the tap. This energy, it's fuels everything, and so we either find a way to work with it and see, or it takes over. And often in life, that's not always a healthy thing, just because of the consequences of life.
Mhm. Very good. So we've covered sex. What about the soul?
Well, and sex is very much, in a sense, related to this growth or formation of the soul. Uh, for Gurdjieff, the soul was very matter of fact, very, very practical. It's probably more akin in English to the word maturing. You know, we have this sense
Hmm.
in English when we say, oh, someone's mature, or they're more mature than what their years say, or they're immature even though they might be old. Well, what do we mean by that? What does this word mature means? And there's not too many English words which express that sense, the beingness of someone.
Hmm.
You know, someone
A
might
mature
be,
beingness.
yeah.
Hmm.
What does that means? In a sense, it means that something is connected or related in a different way. Something's more coherent.
Yeah.
We use that term. Well, what is that? Well, it's not just my body. I mean, once you get past youth, generally your body starts to go downhill. It's kind of falling apart rather than being more intact. So it can't be anything to do with the body. And so that when it comes to feeling, okay, what does that mean when we say someone's mature, particularly if, you know, they're in a leadership role, people are looking for someone who's
Hmm. Hmm.
mature. What does that mean? Does it
Yeah.
mean that one's in control of, say, one's emotions, or does it mean something else? It's such an elusive term, but when we talk about it, we have this innate sense that we know what the word mature means. We have a sense of it, but it's very hard to articulate.
Do you think the soul grows as the body kind of falls apart as you grow older? Is there a growth process of the soul while the body, at least a possibility of that?
Yes, and for Gurdjieff, the body, if you like, is a bit of a chrysalis. You know,
Hmm.
he calls the various aspects of the soul bodies.
Yeah.
We have our first body, which is the physical body. You know, it grows from a single cell and goes through this wonderful
Hmm.
growth phase and matures, and we go through puberty. And he says that the other parts of the soul are completely analogous to that there's an inception or a conception period, and then something is able to grow, and as if the conditions are right. And we have that with the
Right.
physical body. You know, you need to eat, you need to take care of yourself. If you can, the conditions around you. You live in a hot climate, a cold climate. So while there's something that's striving to grow, it requires the conditions to grow in a healthy way. And the same thing for the soul. And so there really becomes a question, well, what do these various parts of this maturing phase need? And in ancient days, there was a real sense of that at every life phase, there was something that was needed for the soul.
Hmm.
So this sense of retirement, you know, in the Western world now, retirement is essentially quit your job and kind of do all those things that you couldn't do in your youth, right?
Yeah.
Because you've had
But then you're
family.
too old to really enjoy. You're too tired and burnt out from your job to enjoy them. It's kind of like it's very sad. Yeah, I
Yeah.
remember like the Tibetans came over and looked at Western people who had worked there, and they've just felt very sad because in their culture, that there is a huge nobility to age,
Mm,
whereas age in the West is a denigration or something, or degradation is what
yeah.
I'm looking for.
Well, it's this worship of the body. It's this trying to keep youthful.
Mm.
And that really means that, you know, we've lost something, that age, and particularly older age, this maturing process, and particularly in retirement where one withdraws from the active life a bit, is not to try to rekindle the days of youth, but there's something important that needs to happen before I die. You know,
Mhm.
there's something else that needs to be matured. And we've sort of lost that in this Western culture as we strive to keep ourselves young, and and that really is, in a sense, lacks a certain obligation to ourselves, that
Yeah.
the body is transient. It's a temporary thing.
Yeah.
And what is the next thing that can emerge out of it? And that really requires something to be observed and studied right from youth, and cultivated and educated. that our older age is very important. Maybe our older age is even more important than our youth, because there's something that's pressing. I need to accomplish something before I die. Well, what is that? You see in Western culture this midlife crisis. People get to their 40s and it's all, what have I done with my life? And the
Yeah,
natural inclination is to try to relive youth. you know,
it's
uh,
terrible. Yeah,
it's it's a tragedy.
yeah.
Something very coarse happens, and we're at finer this finer material that can be with us. And once we begin to have this sense that the body is just a temporary vehicle, an important one, but it makes way for something else, then there's a different relationship with the body, and something
Mhm.
else can appear that maybe is more valuable.
So that would be the soul,
And that would be this thing that we call the soul. But
this thing that we call the soul. Yeah.
in Gurdjieff's sense, it needs to be practical, not just an idea of something that exists somewhere.
Right,
A
like
go-
because that would create this kind of intense dualism that we
yeah,
have a problem with in the West. Is like the soul is over here and the body is here, and um, mhm.
yeah, the soul, in a sense, or the various parts of it need the body. It needs to be nourished by the body. The body is the vehicle for it.
Or the soul is body too, right? The soul is a,
Yeah,
as you say, the soul is a body. In Buddhism, there's three bodies: the Dharmakaya, Sambhogakaya, and Nirmanakaya, and one is this, one is the this, and then there's the subtle body, and then there's you know the Dharmakaya, which is just the space, I guess, the context of everything, and that, but they're all considered bodies. They're not separate from each other, and they don't live in different realms. It's all a singularity, I would
yes.
say.
And that's for Gurdjieff one of the unique things of human life. And he speaks about this in his books on kind of beings of other planets who don't have a body, or they have a different kind of body. But we
Mm,
humans are blessed with, we can have three bodies all in one, all
three in
helping each
one.
other, relating to each other.
Mm.
And he says that's quite unique in the universe. And so rather than this kind of dualist, till we've got the body and we've got the soul, it
And they
kind
also
of
could has three brains. So
love.
brain, that means intelligent bodies. They're not inert matter. They're forms of intelligence, right? The three brains.
Yes, yes.
I think
And
that's
this comes
important.
down to the various energies and qualities, that there's these parts of the soul can engage certain qualities of energies that the other parts can't.
Hmm.
So that sense that we're talking about in sleep and awakening, when I awaken a little bit, or I, I'm a little bit less asleep, there's something in me, in a sense, that is able to tap into that quality. When I'm just in the body will do what it does. It survives, and it
Yeah.
does a pretty good job of that.
Yeah.
So it becomes this question of, well, these qualities can appear because there's something resonant which they can appear in, these aspects of the soul. So it's there's a resonance here. There's a resonance between, I now have a measuring stick, if you'd like, that if these qualities can appear, it means that there's something else forming in me that allows those qualities to appear or be sustained.
Hmm. 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 Or is a question of creating a context, or a space for them to allowing them to appear? Or is it a question of constructing anything, or is it just is the question of sort of letting, let's say, the soul appear, or the spirit appear, or whatever you want to call it?
Yes. Well, there seems to be a number of things. There's, in a sense, no rules or formula. There's certainly that's required. There's an effort that's required on my part.
Mhm.
There's also the conditions that allow that effort to be useful. And then there's also something that we have absolutely no control over, and that is
Right.
done by, in the Christian sense, grace. Because there is something in us that is wishing to move upwardly, not in
Mm-hmm.
a hierarchical sense, but to bring these qualities out. But I often get in the way, or I don't make the necessary efforts, or the conditions aren't helpful.
Yeah.
So there's an intelligence to be brought to this, something required from me, something I need to support in the conditions of my life. And then there's something, like we were speaking about the potency of sex, which I have no control over, but yet I need to find a way to be receptive to or try to get out of the way of. So
Yeah,
it's
that's what I
requires
was
a lot.
getting at, kind of trying to get out of the way of it's often the work. The work is not often a constructive, but a deconstructive act
Yes. Yes.
of getting out of the way.
Yeah.
Maybe that brings us to the next subject, which is God and service. So,
Yes.
what the hell is God and what are we serving? And it's a funny thing. I was thinking about this when it's almost easier now to talk about these things than it was like 10 years ago
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
people because I feel like religion is coming back. I don't know about you, but I feel like I'm not as embarrassed. To use the G word before. I mean,
Yeah.
it's just a word, um, and I almost feel that it needs to come back or something to this
Yeah.
world. Does that
Yes.
make
Yes.
sense?
Yes. No, it does. God has
And
always been a
service as well, right? The sense of serving God. Like, what the fuck is
yes.
that? I mean, for an atheist, I mean,
Yes.
it just has no sense, right? It sounds like
No.
some sort of, but some sort of slavery to fundamentalist principle, but that's not what it is.
Yes. And it's strange. All of the atheist arguments are not arguments for atheism. They're arguments against theism,
Mm.
which which is interesting. Doesn't really follow the method of science. But anyway, that's another conversation.
That's a whole other conversation. Yeah.
But
But I don't
this,
even think that conversation is necessary anymore for a
no.
lot of people. It's like been there, done that. So so
Yeah.
so now we can talk about God and service again.
Yes.
Hilariously enough.
And yeah, there's in it, at least for me, there's this true sense of I either am trying to serve something higher or I'm just serving something lower or just myself.
Yeah,
It becomes that stark.
that Bob Dylan song. You know that song?
Yeah.
You have to serve something. You're either serving something greater, more fantastic, more beautiful, more divine, or you're just serving your banal needs, or you're serving something terrible. You're
Yeah.
always serving something.
Yeah. Yeah.
You're
Yeah.
always in a movement or in a movement of service. I think.
Yes. Yes. And Gurdjieff uses the word being a conscious slave. We're born into this world and something is needed from us, whether we're conscious to it or not. And so it's whether one can transform from a slave into a servant. And the difference between a slave and a servant is just one is more conscious of
Mm-hmm.
the role that they're playing. But also this sense from Gurdjieff that this need to serve and the ability to serve is really at the apex of work. If we can accept that we don't serve now and we can't because we're trapped into this sleep-like self-serve phase, but we feel this sense of needing to serve something else because it allows us to go out of ourselves a little while not rejecting ourselves. Because
Yeah.
in service to something higher, I am needed.
Well, we talked
I
about sex too. I
am
mean,
the
what is
instrument.
sex but that?
Yeah, yeah.
In a way,
It's
sorry to jump in and like interrupt like that,
no,
but
but
I
this,
just like was making the connection between sex and service. It's, you know, at its in its most profound sense, that's what it is. You know, if it's in its most banal sense, it's just getting your rocks off.
yeah.
And there's a like such a big difference between those two things.
Yes, there's, such a subtle but very interesting relationship between sex, soul, and service. It's these three interesting kind of elements. But this notion of service is really needing to accept, I can't serve now, but if there is a wish, what does it mean to serve? To really serve, not just to pay lip service to it.
Mm-hmm,
What
mm-hmm,
does it mean to really serve? Um, and we all aspire to serve God, but maybe we need to lower the aim a little. And maybe this comes back to what we were saying earlier. How do I serve my family? How do I serve my brother, my sister, my father, my mother? How do I
mm-hmm.
serve my colleagues, my business? Bringing it right back
Yeah.
and really trying to delve into what does this mean to serve, particularly when it's inconvenient, particularly when I don't want to serve. Even
Mm-hmm.
at the littlest level might give a bit of a glimpse of what service might mean as it expands. So beyond the family, beyond business, beyond my community, maybe eventually to God. So this notion of we think that we can just serve God because we wish it uh, needs to be shattered. We need to be
Mm-hmm.
humbled a bit and go, well, can we just serve our neighbour?
Yeah.
You know, and
Yeah.
maybe that might give us a bit of a glimpse of what's needed. And I'm sure if we could do that, the whole world would change. But
Mm-hmm. Makes perfect
and,
sense. Yeah.
and part and parcel of that, and we'll delve into this into the course more, is with service, in a sense, moving towards that notion of service is suffering, which is a bit of a dirty word. It's
Mm.
like the word God. What does it mean to suffer? I mean, to really look at it as impartially as we can and as practically as we possibly can. What does it mean to suffer? And this other sense that Gurdjieff brings into it is called conscious labours. So
Mm-hmm.
how do I suffer and work consciously? Which is not a dirty word. It's not anything that he puts around it as something of a chore or a drudgery that
Mm-hmm.
we have to go through life. He certainly puts this in context of obligation.
Yeah.
I'm somehow obliged. It's my duty. It's my duty to undergo this.
Yeah.
Not that I
Because work is
want.
what we don't want to do in a way, right?
Yeah, I don't.
Um,
Certainly don't want to work. I don't want to suffer. I don't want to feel pain. But I don't really know what I want.
yeah. Yeah.
It's interesting, and
Yeah.
we chase our tails.
Yeah.
But to
Well,
accept that a little, it changes something.
yeah,
It
yeah,
changes.
it changes something. Actually, I remember a karate teacher told me once. He just said that's what work is, doing the thing you don't really want to do. And it's so true. I mean, we don't really want to, do the exercises or write the paper or, we'd rather just be, drinking margaritas or something by some poolside, all day long. But then we would, that would not satisfy us. So we need, so then we would suffer, and so when we suffer, we realize that, oh, we can either suffer consciously or unconsciously. Like, we have that choice.
Yeah,
We can either suffer asleep, which is something terrible, or we can go through the sufferings of life because life is hard, and have an enormous amount of meaning in that
yes,
kind of
yes.
suffering.
And that practical approach to suffering. I mean, what does it really mean to suffer? I mean, and we feel that in the body, and we feel it in our feelings, and we can feel it in our mind. But what is those qualities of energies that bring about this experience of suffering, which can change in a heartbeat? I can remember a very early experience I had when I was a teenager. I hated going to school. So for the 6 hours I was there, it was just hell on earth, painful. Everything was boring.
Yeah.
And yet after that, I would then go off and I'd be training for sports because I used to love sports back then, and 3 or 4 hours of training and all sorts of stuff. And I'd love it, and I'd want more of it. I'd get up the next morning, but for that 6 hours during the day, I just hated it. And it suddenly hit me. I spend far more energy and time doing this stuff that I love, and yet this other stuff that I don't like seems to just drain the hell out of me. I hated it. Why? And it was just this change in attitude. What is it that I didn't like about that thing as opposed to about that thing? So it was nothing to do with energy.
Mhm.
Something that I don't like drains me because it's hard. It was just my approach to it. And so that really brought a question. Well, what do I really don't like? And I found for me that as I get older, there is more things that I don't like to do.
Like I don't like doing my
Like to do.
taxes. I avoid them. Like I don't like putting numbers into Excel files and
Oh,
making calculations and doing budgets. And I mean that's just I'd rather stick pens in my eyeballs than do that. So it takes
that's
so much conscious suffering for me to go
good
and
to
do
go.
that one thing. But when I do that, I feel better because I've done it.
Yeah,
And I need to do it. And if I don't do it, I suffer. So
yeah, you're caught between a rock and a hard place. And
yeah,
it's interesting that over time, if you only just keep doing the things that you like, how much your world just grows smaller and smaller and smaller.
yeah, that's a
But
very good point. Yeah,
to begin to look at and maybe even embrace, you may not need to like it, but embrace all of the things that I don't like, and to really to practically look at why is it that I don't like that? What is it in me, this experience that all of a sudden life can enlarge, you know,
hmm
because
hmm
I go from not minding so much that I don't like it, like having to do your taxes. And I certainly have to do a lot of book work, and it's the last thing I want to do, but it also provides me an opportunity. Why is it that I don't like it? Can I bring myself to it in a different way? And that requires something very conscious. If I like it, generally I'm a lot more asleep because I'm carried away with the current of liking. But
yes,
if I
yes,
don't like it, I've got to come to it more consciously because I'm very aware of the not liking. And so I
yeah,
need to navigate that. So
yeah,
it's interesting.
yeah. I was thinking about how like learning an instrument, a guitar, and when you start, you really don't. It's really your fingers are bleeding, and and you're out of tune, and you're just it's terrible.
Mhm.
It's just absolutely terrible. But then when you persist in that, and even when you've persisted in that and become somewhat a good player of your instrument, you still have to keep pushing an edge there, or you just get bored, right? You still have to make things difficult for yourself. You still have
Yes,
to push towards a hard way. Otherwise, you just get you just become habitual in how you do things. So I think it's about change. It's about pushing against your habit, your habit fields.
yes. Being in just always searching to be a little uncomfortable, to stretch yourself. If you do it too much, you can do more harm than good. But yes, this striving, this searching, which brings with it that uncomfortableness, because it's unknown. It's unknown. How am I going to be with this? What's the next? thing. Maybe I work at something not knowing what the result is, but I work at it anyway because I have a sense that if I don't, I know I'm just going to slide backwards, or I'm going to be even more asleep because I'm too comfortable. And so
Hmm.
that, and in a sense, that's that intelligence that says, this is what it means to be alive, to be in between. Yes, I'm all of this stuff that life has produced in me and all of my experiences, but there's this little spark that I need to keep alive that allows me to just stretch a little, be a little uncomfortable with, to step into that unknown cautiously and carefully, but yet it's unknown. And then
Hmm.
something very alive can happen.
Yeah.
But if I'm cut off from that and it's just Groundhog Day every day,
Yeah.
that
Bro.
is
Yeah.
really, for me, the true meaning of hell.
Yeah.
No matter how much wealth, how much health, it kills something.
Yeah. 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 And it's almost the opposite direction of everything, because everybody's looking for happiness and success and ease and comfort, and like that's what we want, that's what we're looking for on some bio, like we're just trying to be safe, and you know but then I guess the heroic thing is turning towards our anxiety, or turning towards um our terrors, or turning towards the things that are just basically uncomfortable. That's weirdly how we get joy, I think. It's like it's a weird sort of paradox.
Yes, yeah. And it's a shame in this modern world that we have abundance. It's in Western worlds, we have a general level of health and wealth that's we've never seen in the world yet. Then it can allow us at least the opportunity to face all those anxieties inside. And what do? We anesthetize it, with drugs or all sorts of things that take us away from, okay, this is what it means to be human when I don't have to worry about where my next meal is coming from so
Mhm.
much. And
Yep.
then I know I can at least be supported in living a longish life. What's next? Well, what's next is what most people in the world have never really had, is this opportunity to come inward, because
Mhm.
most of their life is just about surviving. Well, that should be a privilege for us, and we should be moving towards that. Okay, anxiety or whatever else, let's take a good look at it, move positively towards it, and see
That's
it
the
as the
spiritual life.
material. That's
I
the
say
spiritual life.
the beginning of the spiritual life, right? Which that is kind of perennial. That's what we should be doing. I agree. We need to get that back. In a way, we need to get that back in the
Yeah.
culture.
Yeah, and that's what the West can really bring, because we're not so much concerned with the other stuff.
Mhm.
That doesn't mean that there is not a need to address issues in
Mhm.
relation to health and wealth. There are still plenty of them, but what a privilege. We have a time that most people, if supported, can really take on the inner life, really
Mhm.
take on the spiritual quest. And instead, we go the other way and squabble and fight over all sorts of crazy things which are temporary and generally meaningless.
Mhm. Yep. So there'll be three sessions, we've
Yes.
kind of covered the three sessions, and then you'll also be doing a one-on-one meeting with people. What
Yeah.
what will you do in that? How do you work with people? I'm curious.
Well, it's yeah. There's no formula. It's just the meeting of two people who can share questions or might want to delve into something a little bit more that maybe wasn't either afforded to them, or they weren't ready to speak about that during the course, or something that's just come up in the course of time. But really, to work with someone one on one is, and for me, this is a work as well as a work for them in the sense of needing to meet. It's just a work of being able to meet where we're at. What is it that why are we meeting? what what's here that we wish to explore or exchange, and allow that to emerge organically, not to impose anything on it, but also a hope that out of that one-on-one that there might be something of a more personal nature that could be touched upon, and some material provided that could be
Mhm.
helpful when they exit the course. There's no so much a time limit on it. It might be 5 minutes, might be hours. It's really up to the participants of what they want to explore. Um, so it's very, very free form.
Mhm. Mhm. Very nice. Yeah, I think it's going to be wonderful. So I hope, besides being the hard way is the wonderful way as well, right? Is it not?
Yeah.
It's
Well,
not just a hardness that is nihilistic, that just
no,
that just drags. It's the hardness of facing, the aliveness of one's existence.
yeah, and I've found for me that the hard way helps to soften the way.
Yeah,
It,
exactly.
I can come into a new relationship with myself, because I most of my life is just really about refusing things. But to begin to change something from refusing to acceptance in an intelligent and mature way, there's a lot of energy that becomes available because I spend so much time resisting everything. So that hard way, while it might be hard, while it might be difficult, I have found, not only for myself and others, but is in a way the quickest way to softening up the inner life, so I can come into a different relationship with myself and others. And that I find is the miracle of the Gurdjieff work,
Mm-hmm.
and really any other sincere and genuine work.
Mm-hmm. I think that's a nice place to conclude our conversation. I would also say that we have a reading group, that we look at some of the Gurdjieffian texts of Gurdjieff and teachers like Madame de Salzman, and at Parallax, which I started and which you've come into and enriched the group enormously by doing, because of your experience in the work, and where people can have hands-on, and do Gurdjieffian style exercises and that kind of thing. So if you're interested in that as well, you can be in contact with me. But a really good place to start would I think would be this course. It seems to me
Yeah.
it might be some sort of starting. It might be the start of something.
Yes. Yeah.